Hey guys, it's Ashley, and today I am going to go through all of the books that I've read so far in 2020. I want to preface this video real quick by saying a couple things, the first of which is that I will not be putting up a July wrap-up since I'm going to be including those books in this video. I just figured, why put the work into making a second video when it's literally about the same exact books that I'll be talking about here. So I'll be putting like a little bit more of an emphasis on like what I thought about those books in this video versus all the other books that I've already talked about on my channel. And so I just want to make my second point here after I've had time to edit and look over my video because I realized there were a couple of things that I forgot to mention when I originally filmed in regards to the reading rush. I just wanted to let you guys know that I'm really sorry, but I'm not going to be putting up my last two vlogs just because of some of the things that the reading rush did over the course of the week that I just didn't agree with. I love them and I love this readathon, but I really just want them to take some of this constructive criticism the community has sent them to heart and really make a change if this ever happens again. I know they didn't mean to cause harm or distress, but their actions were insensitive and a bit thoughtless, and while I don't agree that sending personal hate or name-calling is productive to the conversation by any means, criticism is valid, and I hope that they are able to see that. Again, you guys, I'm sorry about the vlogs, but I hope this long-ass video will be able to suffice. So back to the other Ashley. With that being said though, I did read some really great books during the reading rush that I will mention here along with every other book that I've read this year so far. So without further ado, let's get started. I have 38 books on this list, guys. Okay, so this isn't going to be a short video by any means, but I'm going to do my best to get through them quickly. So the first book that I read this year was Starsight by Brandon Sanderson, which was such a good book and a great sequel to Skyward, which was the first book in this story. I definitely think that I liked Skyward better, but this one was still a great sequel and left off on such a cliffhanger that I'm so mad we have to wait so long for the third book. The story is a sci-fi set in space. We follow this girl named Spensa who has all her life wanted to be a pilot of a starship, but because of something that her father did in his past, she's been labeled as sort of not qualified for it, and so she just fights and works her way to get what she deserves. The second book explores more of the world that we didn't get to see in the first one since we didn't really go off-planet much, so that's something that I really loved about this one, and all in all, like I said twice already, it was just a great sequel. So the second book that I read this year was A Conjuring of Light by V.E. Schwab, which was a reread that I continued from 2019 when I started rereading this series. I'm 99.9% sure you all know my thoughts on this story already, but I will say that I am working diligently to finally get you guys a book talk on this book. It's taken me so long and it's just me not wanting to have to go back through every page and skim over and take notes all over again, but I'm working my way through it for the third time, so I promise you, you will have that before the year is over. So next I ended up reading Infinity Sun by Adam Silvera, which I was super excited about, and it just didn't really live up to all of my expectations. The world building was not my favorite, the characters were just kind of introduced at random points and without any explanation, and all in all, I enjoyed this story, but I probably wouldn't pick up the sequel. From what I remember, this world is kind of magical in a way where people will just like kind of get powers when they turn 18. They like may or may not get them. And the story follows two brothers, one of whom is obsessed with the people who do have powers, who are kind of like not really celebrities, but also sort of celebrities in this world. And the other brother wants nothing to do with it. But the tables are turned when the brother who doesn't care about it ends up getting the powers, and the brother who cares too much ends up not getting anything, and things just kind of spiral out of control. The synopsis sounded great. The execution wasn't personally my favorite. So then I just decided to like take a 180 and do a whole reread of the Court of Thorns and Roses series by Sarah J. Maas. And don't ask me why I did this, but like my brain was just like, I need some fairy romance apparently, and I just picked them all back up. The series is really good. I will say that my order of favorites goes 1, 2, 3. I definitely don't like A Court of Wings and Ruin as much as I did when I first read the story, so there's that. But all in all, if you haven't read this series yet, it's has been everywhere since it started coming out, so I'm surprised, but also, like, you do you. You do whatever feels right. So my next read was one that I wasn't expecting to like as much as I did, and that was Little Fires Everywhere by Celeste Ng. If you've watched my video since January, I've read this story because of the series that was coming out on Hulu, and the book was phenomenal. I seriously love this book. I need to reread it. It's so, so, so good. But the TV show was not my favorite, but I'm not talking about the show now, I'm talking about the book. This book was so good. Just read it if you haven't. It's so good. I don't know what else to say. This book is set in this very upper class suburban white neighborhood, and we follow two families. One is the Richardsons, who are a big family in Shaker Heights. They have longtime ties to the town. And the second family we follow is a single mother named Mia and her daughter Pearl, who are kind of nomads of sorts. They move from place to place because she's an artist, and they come in and sort of disrupt the flow a little bit, especially when there is a young Chinese mother who is trying to get her baby back, who there's just this big thing with that, and it's just like a really good story about perfection and motherhood and family, and I really loved this story. So then February rolled around, and I just decided I would make this a completely love and romance month. So the first book I read in February was Of Curses and Kisses by Sandhya Menon. I was really looking forward to this book too, and this one actually did not disappoint. This story is another sort of Beauty and the Beast retelling where we follow this one girl. I actually forget both of their names, so that's great. I just looked them up, so we're good. We follow Jaya, who is like a princess in India, even though India is a democracy, but they're still like old families and they have like princesses of sorts or something. They explain it more in the book, but basically we follow her and this boy named Gray at this boarding school, and Jaya has come to the boarding school because she wants to get back at Gray for something that his family did to her sister, and it's this big thing, but then he doesn't know what she's doing and she doesn't know what he's doing because she doesn't know his backstory, and it's just like this big like miscommunication ball of fire that's just going up in flames. But it's great. It's a great story. I love boarding school stories, so like that already had me, but all in all I did really enjoy this one. So then, to continue on with my little romance bubble I had going on, I picked up Date Me Bryson Keller by Kevin Van Wy, which was an arc that I got from Penguin, Get Underlined. The story was absolutely adorable. It's a gay romance. I loved it so much. It was sweet, it was charming, it got you all in your feelings, and it made you want to cry and also laugh, and it was great. I actually read this book entirely in one sitting and stayed up until like, I want to say 3 a.m. getting through it. That's how much I ended up liking it. So it's basically about this kid named Bryson who's the most popular kid in school, and he's on this dare where he has to date one person a week, and this kid Kai is kind of still in the closet, and one day something happens where he's just like in his head and he just kind of like spirals, and he suddenly just like asks him to date him, and he says yeah, and then things go from there. The next couple of books I don't physically have, but they'll pop up right here. The first of which was Red, White, and Royal Blue by Casey McKinston, which like, I think you know how I feel. This book was so adorable. So freaking adorable. I need to reread it right now because every time I think about it, I just like am dying to reread it. If you don't know, it's pretty much just like the Prince of England and the first son of the US fall in love. And it's beautiful. And then I picked up If I'm Being Honest by Emily Wibberley and somebody else. Hold on. Wait. I always forget that this book was co-authored. Austin Sigmund Broca. There we go. This story was really cute too. It's basically sort of like a retelling of Taming of the Shrew, but not really a retelling because the main character is like trying to reenact it in a way. So like, I don't know how much of a retelling that is, but it has to do with that sort of storyline where the main character is like super honest with people all the time, and it gets her into some trouble, and so she decides to kind of tame herself, where she goes and makes amends and apologizes for all the things that she's done, and she ends up getting stuck on this guy who she basically made fun of and caused everybody else to make fun of when they were younger, and he doesn't forgive her, and so the whole book is her like working to get him to forgive her for it. It's great. So We Are the Wildcats by Siobhan Vivian was the next book that I read, and I wasn't a huge fan of this one, unfortunately. This takes place over 24 hours with this field hockey team in high school who is doing this like not ritual before, but they're like kind of initiating the new people, and then they decide to like, I don't know, prove to the coach that like they have what it takes to win the championship because they lost it for the first time in 5 years last year, and the coach like blames them for it, and it's like this big like toxic story, and I don't really like it. Toxicity, like I said, the coach is awful and made me want to throw up every time that I read something with him in it. And also the ending was just not super satisfying. There was a moment where obviously there was a turnaround and the girls were like, wait, this is what's really happening. We need to stand up for ourselves, which was great. But we got like 3 pages after that, and I was like, it's just not worth it for the amount of trouble that we had to go through with the toxic, gross, gaslighting coach, and then we get like this much of a payoff. It's just like, I can't. It was not my favorite story, I'm sorry. And then I read With the Fire on High by Elizabeth Acevedo, which was a great turn from that book that I just read. The story is about Emily, who when she was younger in high school, I don't remember how young she was, but she had a child, and so she's in her senior year. Her kid is like 1 or 2, and she's having to struggle between going to college for cooking and for culinary arts, which is what she desperately wants to do with her life, or staying, getting a job, making money to support herself, her child, her grandmother, her family. I've said it a bunch of times and I'll say it again, Elizabeth Acevedo is a freaking like god when it comes to writing. I love her stories so much. She just makes them so easy to just love and just read so quickly and really like empathize with the characters, and it's just so hard not to like one of her stories. So then, because I took a little bit of a turn from romance, I decided to sort of get back in there, and I ended up rereading Fangirl by Rainbow Rowell, which is one of my favorite books. I never really talk about it much on this channel, but I really do love this story. Not only is it just kind of like a classic booktube book where like it's been around since the beginning of when people started making videos, but also like it's just adorable. It is a bit of a romance, bit of a like contemporary where she's sort of trying to find herself and figure out what she wants to do, and it's wonderful. And then because I just reread Fangirl and I decided I wanted to finally pick up Carry On by Rainbow Rowell, I did just that. I was expecting to like this book more than I did. I still really enjoyed it for the most part, but overall I just feel like it wasn't my favorite thing ever, and it's really, really hard for me to like pinpoint exactly what it was. I tried explaining it in one of my wrap-ups that I put up on my channel at some point. A couple people in the comments were telling me that I was a little bit off in like my information on it, so I don't want to say it again and get it wrong. So I'm just gonna say that I did really enjoy this story. Would I pick it up again? Probably not. So I hope that's like a good way of showing how much I liked it, if that makes sense. I enjoyed it, but it was probably like a one-time read. So then at this point, the stay home reading rush was happening, so I decided to participate in that back in March, and I ended up reading Nevermore, rereading, and then reading for the first time Wondersmith by Morgan Crow, which, no, by Morgan Crow. These aren't by Morgan Crow. They're by Jessica Townsend. I'm sorry, Morgan Crow's the character. I'm sure you've heard me rave about these on my channel before. They're middle grade. They are amazing, whimsical stories about Morgan Crow, who is the unluckiest girl in the world, and her journeys through Nevermore. The first book is amazing and wonderful and so good, but the second book though, ugh, so freaking good. Like, if you've read the first one, please go get the second one. If you haven't read the first one, pick up the first one. It's so good. I'm so excited for Hollowpox. Oh my god. It's supposed to come out in October. I'm really hoping they don't push back the date or anything. I'm just like dying. I want them so bad. Oh my god. And then I read The Upside of Falling by Alex Light, which was just like a decent YA romance story. It was all about fake dating, which is what initially drew me in, but overall it wasn't anything like super special. It did get a little bit deeper than I was expecting, which I really enjoyed for like a contemporary romance, but overall it wasn't like my favorite romance I've ever read. It was just another like feel-good story that made you smile at the end. So right around like April, May, June-ish, I started really feeling the effects of quarantine and like staying at home. And I recently went from part-time to full-time in the job that I had, and things were just like not my favorite during those months. Initially, I actually wanted to make a video about rereading the Twilight series, but with my mom, because it had been years and years since I'd reread those books, and I just wanted to do it just for it's sort of like a joke in a way. Like, I don't really enjoy those books anymore, but I wanted to do it just because I know my mom and me have a lot of fun doing stuff like that, so I thought it would be fun. So we did end up rereading Twilight, like the whole book, we ended up rereading it, but I only vlogged half of it because during that time, Midnight Sun was announced, and then everybody was like going crazy over Twilight, and I didn't want to put something out that was like shitting on Twilight. So that never made it to the light of day, and it won't because I don't have the entire vlog to even edit, but just letting you guys know, I did reread Twilight and it was just as bad as I remember it being, so that's good. So that took up like the entire month of April, I want to say. I don't remember exactly when this happened because I didn't mark it on my Goodreads, but like I'm pretty sure that's what happened. And then I don't know where my brain was at, because I went from wanting to read Twilight to wanting to read Emma by Jane Austen. And I really think that quarantine was kind of fucking with my head, because like, how does one go from wanting to read Twilight to wanting to read Emma? I don't understand, but I did it. Honestly, I was kind of stupid when I went into this because I've wanted to read this for a really long time, but it took me forever to get through it. It took me legitimately the entire month of May to read this. When you didn't hear from me, or like I didn't put up any videos or anything, it was literally because I was getting through this book. And it took me so long because I was physically reading it myself rather than like listening to the audiobook while I read along, which is what I'm going to do when I read Pride and Prejudice soon, because I'm not going through a month of reading one book again. I liked this a lot more than I thought I was going to. I've always like shunned classics and been like, no, I can't understand, my brain doesn't work that way, I don't like them, but I really liked this one, so it's kind of changing my mind and I kind of want to read more classic books. I also recently watched the new Emma movie and it was so good, and I just want like all of the clothing. Then, because there's a lot more books where this came from, I ended up picking up Salt to the Sea by Wreaths. This was amazing. I loved this so much. It had me in tears by the end. It was just so good and made me want to read so many more historical fiction novels. This story was about World War II and the invasion of Germany by Russia. It was at the very end where Germany was about to surrender and people were trying to flee, and the refugees were trying to get onto the big ships that Germany was trying to take them and save them. This story is actually about the Wilhelm Gustloff, which was actually sunk. The sinking of these ships is something that not a lot of people know about, which is why in her author's note, Wreaths like mentions that. I want to say like 9,000 people died, including like 5,000 children, and it was awful, and this book definitely highlights how awful it was, which is why it had me crying at the end of it. All in all, the story is like, it's just really, really good. I loved this so much. The next book that I read was Tristan Strong Punches a Hole in the Sky by Kwame Mabalia, which was really, really good. I'm starting to get into the stories that I more recently talked about, so I won't spend too much time on these, but this is a Rick Riordan Presents book centering around West African mythology as well as African American folklore and fables. It's really, really, really good, and I highly recommend picking it up if you're in the middle grade and you're looking for just another fun mythological journey adventure story. It's really good. Next up was The Gilded Ones by Namina Forna, which is a West African inspired fantasy, and it's also a debut as well as Tristan Strong was, and these books were so good for debuts. Like, I just like hope that when I finally finish a book that it will be as good as any of these books. They were so good. The story follows Dika, who's 16 and is about to go through this like blood ritual where if she bleeds red, she's pure and she's fine. If she bleeds gold, she's like demonic. And so she ends up bleeding gold, she's labeled demonic, she gets sentenced to death, but then she's saved and she ends up becoming part of the Emperor's army. This book uncovers a lot of things about the patriarchal society that is in this story. Dismantle the patriarchy, y'all. The next book that I read was Let's Talk About Love by Claire Kahn, which I've actually heard mixed reviews about since putting in a video that I read this story. I've had some people tell me it's not good ace rep, I've had some people tell me they liked the ace rep, so I've gotten a lot of mixed reviews about it, so I'll just leave that there for you. It's pretty much a story about a girl named Alice who's asexual, who some of the people in her life have told her that because she doesn't want to have sex, she's incapable of love, which is completely invalid, and she is just trying to figure that out, as well as figuring out how to, like, tell her parents, struggling with what she wants to do in life and things like that. And there is a romance in the story, and overall I enjoyed, like, the story of it, but I can't speak for the rep because I am not asexual, so I'll just leave that there because I've heard some mixed things, so I'm not sure if it's good or not. After that, I read I Killed Zoe Spanos by Kit Frick, which was a really good thriller. As I mentioned in another video, it was a bit confusing because there were 3 different, like, things that we were following at the same time, and a couple of different, like, time periods, and we would always go back and forth between time and stuff and characters, so it was a bit confusing, but once you understood, like, what we were trying to figure out, it was not too bad. The beginning of this book was not my favorite because it was so confusing, but the end of it was really good. It's essentially about this girl named Zoe Spanos who goes missing and nobody knows what happens to her. Flash forward 6 months later, there's this girl named Anna who comes into town for a babysitting job over the summer, and she looks remarkably similar to Zoe Spanos, and by the end of the summer she ends up confessing to her murder despite the fact that the entire time you know that they've never met, so it's, like, super confusing, but in the end things sort of make sense, so I'll leave it there. Next up, I read Graceling by Kristen Cashore, which was a really, really good fantasy story. I really loved this book. It's about this girl named Katsa who has a grace, which is what they call a sort of power or something that you're really, really good at in this world, and her grace is killing, so she is really good at killing people. The beginning of the story starts out with her and a couple of other people rescuing this older guy from this other king in one of the kingdoms, and then come to find out that it's actually the grandfather of a prince of a different kingdom, and so that prince comes looking for the grandfather, and they have to try to figure out who ended up stealing the grandfather because it wasn't the king was just holding him captive, and it's just like this big thing that they're trying to figure out. The story is really great. The magic system is super easy to follow. It's not complex at all. I will say if you read this story, you will want Katsa and Poe to get together, and I will not tell you whether that happens or not. I will just tell you that it's a very good book. I'm definitely going to be picking up the next one, though I don't believe that it follows the same characters, so I'll have to double check on that. I think it's actually like a prequel. Oh, you know what? I was kind of wrong. So I ended up reading Black Girl Unlimited by Echo Brown before I read Graceling, so we're just gonna add it in right here. The story was really, really good. Like I said in my, like, wrap up or whenever I talked about this, this was definitely not the sort of story that I thought it was going to be, because it's kind of, you know, put on the synopsis and everything that it's about, like, a young wizard, so I was like, ooh, fun, magic, but it's all just, like, metaphors throughout the entire thing for Echo Brown's life, and it's a memoir of sorts that's very, like, not lyrical, but very like metaphorical and very, like, beautiful writing. The story does get sort of deep and dark at times, so I would definitely look into that before reading. There are trigger warnings for sexual assault, for substance abuse, for violence, and things along that nature. So we finally come to my July wrap-up in a way. The next 12 books I will talk about, because I read 12 books this month, and I thought 7 was a big number last month. Yeah, 12 books. So let's just get into it before it takes up too much time. I will say, based on my July TBR, I did end up reading 4 out of the 5 books that I had planned, so proud of that. Now my camera's about to die, so be right back while I change the battery. Okay, sorry if this angle changed a little bit. I had to maneuver my camera a bit to get the battery out, so we're good now though. So the first book I ended up reading in July was Aru Shah and the Song of Death by Roshni Chakshi, which I started reading in June and finished in July. The story was super cute. It was just as good as the first one, if not better, because of the new characters who were introduced. This whole series just continues to get better as it goes on, and I'm really excited to read The Tree of Wishes, which is the newest book that I wasn't able to get to in July. Personally, I just really love Aru, and I love how snarky she is, because she always has, like, the best comebacks that just make you laugh every time. The story is full of childish humor, but the humor that will, like, make you laugh even as an adult. So definitely recommend picking this up. Again, if you're into middle grade stories and you don't mind a bit of child humor, but you want a good like laugh anyway, it's a really good story, and it's also a great way to learn about Hindu mythology. So then I ended up picking up A Song of Wreaths and Ruin by Roseanne A. Brown, which was one of the books that I was really looking forward to reading this month because so many people had talked it up so much, so it really got me excited for it. The story definitely did not disappoint. I really enjoyed it so much. There were a lot of different twists that happened in this story that I wasn't expecting. In this story, we follow two characters. The first one is Malik, who is from the Eshran tribe, which is a group of people in the story who are kind of oppressed and are forced to work as like servants and slaves. Malik suffers from anxiety attacks and panic attacks. His sister ends up getting taken in the beginning of the story, and he is forced to do something in order to get her back. And then we follow Karina, who is the princess of Ziran, which is like the big capital world kind of thing that we're living in. And she wants nothing to do with the crown, as most YA princesses do. And she ends up trying to like get enough money saved and stashed away to eventually get out of town and never have to come back. She's still suffering from the grief of her sister dying like 10 years before. Her mother is not really like present in her life all the time. Her decision making is not the best, but overall, I really like both of them. Basically, the story starts when there's a big festival coming. There are these champions from each of the patron deities who are picked to compete during this festival, and then whoever wins, it will be like the age of the rabbit or the age of the lion or whatever. Malik ends up entering and ends up becoming picked as a champion, and then come to find out the prize that the winner will win is Karina's hand in marriage. And so there's like a lot more that goes into this story, but overall, there are just many ulterior motives and a lot going on. I actually have a lot of notes written out for this book, and I was planning to make a book talk for it and just haven't gotten around to that yet. So if that's something you would be interested, let me know down below, because I've been really wanting to get back into making more book talks and more reviews like I used to. So if that's something that you would like to see, just let a girl know. So then I decided randomly to participate in the Rereadathon, and the first book that I read for that was Permanent Record by Mary H.K. Choi, which I really did enjoy. This story is about a guy named Pablo who works at a bodega in New York, and he doesn't really know where his life is going. In comes Leanna, who is a major mega pop star, and she's got issues of her own, and one night they kind of have a little bit of a bonding moment, and then ever since then they're like kind of together throughout the book, but also not really together. And there's like a lot of stuff happening in his life, and all in all, the story is a much more like contemporary than it is a romance story, but I still really enjoyed it. I said this in my vlog, but I really love Mary H.K. Choi's writing style in this story. Pablo's voice is just so clear and so fun to follow that that's what made this book enjoyable to get through and to read. And then I ended up picking up and finishing the group book, which was The Silence of Bones by June Her. This is a mystery thriller set in the Joseon area of Korea in like the early 1800s, and it's really good. I think the historical setting of the story really gave the book a like sort of creepy, mysterious atmosphere, especially because there was so much death in this book, because there's a crime being investigated and people just keep dying. It was really interesting to read about some of the customs during that time and some of the history that I didn't know anything about when it came to Korea. There was a lot that had to do with religion and also political unrest in this story that I think really added to the whole atmosphere of turmoil and things like that. So definitely was a good book for me. I really enjoyed it, and there were so many twists and turns that happened in this book that I was not expecting. It was like one twist after another, and I was like, will it end? Because I don't really want it to end. So then I picked up Clap When You Land by Elizabeth Acevedo because I had just gotten this book for my birthday and I've been waiting for it, and I wanted to read it as soon as I got it. Camino lives in the Dominican Republic and Yahara lives in New York. They both share the same father, but neither knows that the other exists. So one day their father is flying from New York to the Dominican Republic to visit Camino, and his plane goes down, and the girls, through grief and tragedy, find out that the other exists, that they have a half-sister, and there is a lot of like things that come about because of that. The story was phenomenal. It's written in verse, so there was a lot of poetry like writing throughout it all that really made the story feel that much more powerful. And in addition, the ideas that were explored of grief and family and love were just really all around beautiful and good, and it was so nice to read, and I just highly recommend this story. And as I said before, all of Elizabeth Acevedo's work, because I can't with her books. They're just so freaking good. Then I took a bit of a detour, because by the time I finished that book, there were like 2 days left before the reading rush, and I was like, I'm not gonna be able to read anything. It's fine, I just won't. And then I just read 2 whole books in that time. I read 2 whole books in the 2 days before the reading rush started, so that's cool. The first book I decided to read, because it was short and I just wanted something fun, was Say Yes Summer by Lindsay Roth Cooley, I believe is her name, Cully Cooley. The story was just a really fun one about this girl named Rachel who has been kind of like a no girl her whole life, meaning like, you know how there's like the yes man who will do literally anything? Well, this is a no girl. She says no to literally everything. She's kind of just like flown under the radar during high school, gotten straight A's and all that kind of stuff, and this summer she decides, well, why don't I just start saying yes to everything? So she says yes, and she has a Say Yes Summer. It was just a cute YA romance contemporary story. There was a bit of a love triangle in this one, which I wasn't expecting, but also it was like a friends to lovers story, so like, loved that. But also, like, you know when there's that one moment in a story that, you know, there's a choice that the character has to make, and it's clearly like a bad choice that you know that they're going to make, and you're like, why would you do that? Like, on what world would you decide that that's the choice that you want to make, and then you get mad when they make that choice and everything goes to hell? That's this book. The story was still really fun and enjoyable. I read this in literally one sitting in like less than 5 hours. And then because I couldn't just stop there, I had to read another book in one sitting the next day, and that book ended up being This Is My America by Kim Johnson, which I was really looking forward to reading. If you remember, if you watched my books I want to read this summer video. I've had this arc for a while. The story is about this girl named Tracy whose father is on death row for a crime he didn't commit, and he only has like 275 days left, and she keeps writing to this organization called Innocence X, which is supposed to get Black people who are imprisoned for crimes they didn't commit like off. They're supposed to, like, I guess, prove them innocent, like that kind of thing. And she's been writing to them ever since her father was convicted, but nobody's ever replied. And then on top of that, while she's still trying to get her father free, her brother is arrested for something that he didn't do. And so it's just like this big thing that like just takes over her life, and she ends up realizing that she's the one who has to figure out what happened and has to figure out how to get them both out. So she ends up uncovering the like horrible racist background that this town has been hiding. The story was really, really good, like genuinely one of the best stories that I've read this year so far. I will say that there is like a bit of romance in it that I wasn't expecting, and also like didn't really add much to the story, but if you just like get past that a little bit, then it's a really good story. Plus the end will make you cry. Like, it'll make you cry happy tears, okay? Like really happy tears. But this story definitely brings to light a lot of the systemic racism that is still inherent in our society today, and is still such a big part that we need to focus on and emphasize to get out. We need to push it out, because stuff like this still happens, and it's horrible. Literally been filming for like a full hour. I have a full hour's worth of footage right now. This is fun. So then the last 5 books that I read that I'll focus on now, I read all as part of the reading rush. So the first book that I ended up finishing was The Hand on the Wall by Maureen Johnson, which I've said I wanted to get to the whole beginning of the year, and I didn't until now, and so I finally got to it. I forced myself to get to it. This book was so good. I would definitely say that the second one, now that I've had some time to think about it, was better than this one, just because I was able to sort of predict what was going to happen based on what ended up happening in this story. But overall, the 3 books as a whole were just really, really good. I love this series so much. I will definitely reread it at some point to like remember all of the details, but something that I loved about this one was that it was constantly back and forth between the 1930s and 40s and now, and it was constantly like giving you little bits and pieces of information that were just like so difficult to put together up until the very end. I don't know how satisfied I am with the whole ending of the whodunit mystery, that kind of thing, but overall it was a great series. So next I ended up finishing We Were Liars by E. Lockhart, which is the super short book that I've had on my shelves 4 years, and it took me forever to get through. This story is about the rich Sinclair family who every summer spends their time on an island off the coast of like Martha's Vineyard. Four of the cousins, but one who's like not really a cousin but is still like considered a cousin. They hang out together every summer and they're really close friends, and one summer something tragic happens, but you don't know what. You just know that the main character was hurt because of it, and she has massive migraines and headaches, and you don't know what happened, and because she doesn't remember what happened. And so the whole story is you trying to figure out what people are hiding from her because nobody will tell her the truth about what happened. Overall, while I do think the story was really good and I really enjoyed the writing personally, actual like twist and everything, I don't know how much I was a fan of it, because by the end I was just kind of like mad at everybody rather than like understanding or feeling sorry or that kind of thing. I was just like, how could you be so stupid? I think I still have to think about it a little bit more, but that was like my initial thought. Like, I finished the book and I was just staring off into space like, I'm sorry, but what? The third book I ended up finishing was Wicked Fox by Kat Cho, which I enjoyed for the most part, but again had some things that I was like not the biggest fan of. I'm not sure if I mentioned this in my vlogs or not, but I'm not the biggest fan of how a lot of the characters were introduced like very quickly. There were like little mentions of people here and there who ended up coming back at the end to have like a much bigger role, and by the end I just kind of forgot who some people were. I was confused by the whole twist in the story and things, and the very last like big battle fight scene thing was just kind of confusing personally to me. Also, I do think that the story could have been a bit shorter because a lot of the scenes were sort of similar in my opinion. But overall, I really enjoyed being set in Seoul, in a place where there are a lot of different like formalities and things that I didn't know about, like all of the little like endings that you would add to names in South Korea. Being set there in general was like a different reading experience, so I did really enjoy that, and I did like the characters for the most part. So now I'm gonna get to the books that I did not get to tell you about because my last two vlogs for the reading rush are not going up. The first of which I read in one sitting. I read in literally like 6 hours, and it was the best book that I read during the reading rush, and that was Felix Ever After by Case and Calendar. This book was so good. It was so good. The story is about Felix, who is a young black trans boy who is going to this arts program during the summer. He's still trying to figure out his gender identity, and he's trying to, you know, figure out love and like whether he's worthy and deserving of love. He struggles with a lot of things in the beginning of this story and even through to the end. But one day somebody posts pictures of him pre-transition as well as his old name in the lobby of the school thing, and people see it and he kind of has a breakdown and he decides he wants to get revenge and find out who it was who did this. The story was simultaneously what I was expecting and also not what I was expecting. Felix ends up believing that it's one person who did this, and he decides to catfish him, but then ends up like actually liking him, and it's just kind of like this turn of events that I was like, what is happening? Oh my god. It's another one of those things that's like, dude, don't do this, you're gonna regret this later, and he does it anyway and you're like, ugh! But this story was so good. I love Felix. I loved just like going on this journey with him, and just like I can't even explain to you how much I really liked this story. I also really loved Ezra, who is his best friend in this story, who also becomes like a major part of it. I can't like think about this book without smiling. And so the last story that I ended up reading for the reading rush was Mooncakes by, oh my god, I don't even know who wrote it, Suzanne Walker. I had no expectations going into this story. It's a graphic novel about this like witch, and then there's like a werewolf, and there's like lots of like queer representation and stuff, and it's just really overall like a super cute story. It's got a lot of like witchy fall sort of vibes that I really liked. It was a really quick and fun read, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. And then the last book that I want to mention, the last book that I recently finished reading, that I literally finished reading last night, was by far the best book that I've read this year. and that was Scythe by Neil Shusterman. As I mentioned in my vlog, I actually started reading this months ago when I started listening to it on audiobook one day when I was coming back from Orlando, which is like a 2-hour ride from my place. And ever since then, I was listening to it on and off every now and then when I would feel like it. But during this readathon, I just decided to continue to listen to it when I was playing Animal Crossing at times, and I was flying through it. This story is so good. It's like, I can't even explain how good this story is. Oh my god. I love the characters, I love the world, I love how awful everything made me feel at times, and how great the ending was. Like, literally, I had to come into my room last night to finish listening to this because it was just like I was just staring off into space, like listening and being like so just like shell-shocked by what was happening. I couldn't breathe during it. I was so worried. I think I'm going to make like a full review and book talk for this one up on my channel, so you'll hear my full thoughts there, but like genuinely this was the best book that I've read so far this year, and I'm going to start Thunderhead immediately. Like, I can't explain. I loved this so much. I can't stop thinking about it. I have so much more I want to say, but I don't want to like put it all here, so just keep an eye out for that book talk that'll be coming because I can't. So guys, those are all 38, but actually 40 books that I read so far this year because I didn't put Twilight or Emma on my Goodreads for some reason, so it's actually 40 books. The fact that my year goal is 50 books and I've already read 40 and it's July is just astonishing to me. Like last year, the entire year, I only read 40 books. So like, think I'm doing pretty good. Overall, I am extremely happy with what I've been able to accomplish this year so far. I am like super proud of myself for reading all of these books, and I don't know, I don't really have much else to say. I just still can't believe that I've done this much. If you have one or multiple favorite books that you've read so far this year, please let me know down below so I can add to my TBR. And if you read any of the books that I mentioned here, feel free to talk about them with me in the comments below. I hope that your reading year so far has been going well, and even if it hasn't, just look on the bright side, at least you're reading something, so like don't be too hard on yourself. But I think that is going to be it for this video. If you want to follow me on social media, all of my links and handles are in the description below. But thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you for 50,000 subscribers. I haven't said it in a full video yet, but here it is. And I'll catch you guys later. Bye!